painting a simple landscape in watercolor, and we're going to be using basically one color to do it. This is a very, very good beginning tutorial, very simple. I've just put tape around my paper to make it a little bit easier for me to have some edges and to create a frame. So I'm just using a bigger brush and I'm just making a big puddle of water in my tray because I'm gonna first paint the background, which would be, if you're looking at a landscape, it would be the sky. And the landscape we're going to be painting is as if we were sitting on a mountain looking down at the valley or other mountains. So I'm going to use a little bit of blue. Come on, blue. Now, since this is going to be something that's furthest away from it, this is going to be the lightest and the dullest color. So as things move further away from us, they get a little bit duller, a little bit bluer, and that is called atmospheric perspective. So to make this a little bit duller, you could add a few different colors to it. I'm going to add a little bit of orange. It's gonna kind of turn it into a gray. You might want to just test it on a paper towel to make sure it's the color that you want. So I'll usually just brush it on there and say, oh, or another piece of watercolor paper, that works too. And then you're gonna paint in your sky. To get a flat wash, I like to actually have my paper vertical, not on a table, but this will still work. It's kind of hard to get used to painting that way. You just want to make sure. You can go back in lightly in places, but you don't want to scrub your paper. Scrubbing would be if I kept going back and forth, and eventually it would rub right through your paper. If you get bunches of water, you can just dry off your brush a little bit and just drag it over that area a little. So after you get this layer done, you need to let it dry before you add the second layer. Okay, now once it's dry, you can tell it's dry because it's not going to be shiny anymore. If you made a mistake like I did right here, just cover it up with your foreground later, or maybe even your middle ground. So I'm just adding a little bit more blue to my puddle and a little bit more orange, and I am going to lightly paint in some mountains that are going to be back here. These are mountains in my head. Well, just like I did before, I'm going to let this dry before I start the next layer. For this next step, I've added a little bit more blue to my puddle, and I'm just going to make one more mountain range before I paint the mountain that we are on. Okay, once this is dried, you can go ahead and paint in your foreground. I'm making my puddle just a little bit bigger, not too much. And I'm going to add a lot of blue and just a touch of orange. So I'm going to paint a hill coming down here and then maybe starting to come up on that side. If it bothers you, because you can kind of see those mountains through this, you can make this color a tiny bit darker and brighter and go back over it. Okay, once the last layer you painted is dried, you're going to go ahead and paint in the foreground, which is going to be some pine trees. You want to make sure though that you use a ton of blue and make sure you're letting each layer dry in between. And if you make a mistake, like I did, it's okay. Just figure out a way to incorporate it or add something over the top of it. So I'm going to start with this pine tree right here, and I'm going to start at the very, very bottom. And I'm just going to make this kind of bushy pine needles. I'm going to start from the bottom on this one. There's that without the reflection. Okay, so now I'm just going to paint a smaller pine tree right here next to this one. Okay, and then you can add some darker areas in there if you want some shadows. It ends up looking like a monochromatic painting or a painting where you just use one color. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I have had a lot of people ask about how to paint landscapes, and this is the most simple way I've ever learned to begin with in watercolor. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and hopefully I will see you later on YouTube.